In Sentinels' last game against G2, Sentinels played Deadlock on both maps. They played it here on Bind with this comp, and then they played it on Lotus as well. Now, of course, as many of you will know, Sentinels lost that game 2-0, and so we're going to take a look at Sentinels playing Deadlock on Bind and Lotus and ask, is this a direction that they should really be going in, or are there better options available? Now, it should be said that Sentinels aren't playing Deadlock on every map or anything like that. I'm pretty sure that these are the only two maps where Sentinels are playing Deadlock, but it is still quite notable that this is a bit of a different direction to where most teams are going. So, is it worth it? Well, first let's look at one of the positives of Deadlock, of course. Like this round from Bind here, where you're going to see that if we can get into a post plant, Deadlock is very, very strong.
Right back at it. They're in a driving seat.
And one of the other problems being that Tens now has the Thrash available again. Yes, last time he didn't get much value out of it. It was Trent that actually had that wild situation outside Showers. But here, full clear of Hookah, clear into sight. The ult's magnificent on Bind.
That gets so deep. And you can see they slow things down so that you actually don't know what's going on if you're G2 right now.
Just enough of a pause as well. Rotations are finally arriving here. Lee, straight shots. Nothing quite landing. The barrier mesh in his face. A lot of util's going to be committed. Spend it out here to try and push these players out of the spot. But again, John QT not to be removed. And again, this wall is just causing too many problems. Round two. So Thrash being used on equal size, I think, is going to be sending it flying. Detainment, at least catching the one, but still holding it down. Zenken perched up on high, delivering. Raining down at death blows.
So there you see a good example of how the wall can deny some value from the opponent. And in fact, if John hadn't got caught by the Gecko ult as well, you know, the Sonic sensors probably would have come into play. And there's many, many clips I could show you of Deadlock being good in a postman. But I do just want to quickly talk about this comp then and, you know, why they went for this comp and something that I think was missing when they were playing this comp Sentinels. Because obviously we brought in the Deadlock to replace Viper, right? So, you know, Viper is a very common agent here on Bind. And so why have we picked this Deadlock? What are some other advantages that Deadlock can give us over Viper? Well, I want to show you this clip here from round number 9 of something that I don't think the Sentinels did well enough when we're playing Deadlock, because to me, this is one of the main things that you simply must use Deadlock for, right? In that what we have here is we've got Sentinels coming over towards Shower with their Fade and their Deadlock, and you see that we managed to get 2 players here with this Gravnet. You can't see behind my head, but actually there is a raise behind my head just here that is also caught by this Gravnet. And we're going to get a Prowler in here that's going to reveal where this guy is. The problem is we don't have a nade to chain it with because our raise is actually over towards short. Now, obviously, this is part of, you know, whatever this exec is, you know, whatever they're trying. I understand that, but I do think that they were missing this, right? That a nade here, this is a kill, right? This is a kill with a nade. And we were missing this. And you're going to see a seize comes in after as well, right? So you imagine this guy here. He is now seized. He is crouched. You know where he is. Any nade is a kill. And this, I think, is what Sentinels were really missing. That yes, they benefited maybe somewhat from some of the post-plant situations on the attack side, but I think if you really want to play Deadlock to the max, you have to be taking advantage of those kind of combinations that you can do with a comp like this, where, you know, we can chain, you know, some of that util together like a Gravnet and then figure out where they are with a Prowler, and then you can nade them and seize them and, you know, get free kills from util without even needing to see anyone. And so maybe they didn't maximize their attacking potential, but their attack side wasn't that bad. It was on the defensive side where they really struggled. And you might think that's a bit strange because Deadlock, you know, you might assume is a defensive agent. But the problem that they had was this was the kind of setup that they were going for a lot, where we've got our Brim and Deadlock. This is the bonus round for G2 when they are on the attack side. And they were going for something like this a lot. And to me, this kind of setup, and as I said, this is the setup that they went for in most rounds, this has problems, right? Not necessarily with everything that Deadlock's doing, right? The 2 Sonic sensors are in good spots, right? You know, if they drop down here, they get stunned. Makes sense, right? But just, it has some problems on kind of both sides of the map. One is obviously we don't have a Viper and we only have Brim smokes. So, for instance, you know, we see G2 coming to pressure out here towards Shower. It's harder for these guys out here because there's never going to be a smoke in here, right? You can never smoke that off with this setup. Right, which is kind of the first problem, that, you know, you have some weaknesses on the other side of the map because of this comp as well. But you're going to see in this round, you know, we pressure towards Shower early on here for G2. But over here, we just have no information. And you're going to see that come in this round, that if we're just standing in this stance just here, we have nothing to tell us, you know, what's really going on. And so, you know, these guys are playing a bit passive over towards A in this round, right? They're a little bit passive overall. Again, they don't really have too many smokes to help them. But now we've let G2, you know, kind of walk all the way up here. We don't have any info. They've walked all the way up here. They're going to get all the way in here. And you're going to see that this wall from the Deadlock doesn't come out quick enough because we have no idea of what's about to hit us.
Nothing and flanked really fast. But Sentinel's not doing anything with that information.
Well, he's spawning too much here, Trailblazer needs to be broken. Grabbing it in response to it, but they're being squeezed. Barrier mesh, hello, that makes things very damn awkward. Straight in through, onto the side as well. They are just overwhelming it. Brute force. Name of the game here for G2, still with a plant online. And the reinforcements of Sentinels.
Thanks, Wings.
Just lacking that timing for now. Now grouped up and catching this one still. It's bullets to the side, traded. I see there, making sure to shut down Zekken. 2v3 still for Sentinels, and they do have a slight weapon advantage, but only slight. Still getting a bit of a move on the run-up. Trent is happy to just play the clock.
So you can see there that we just get caught off. And it must be said that they did use a Prowler out here towards Showers that doesn't see anything, right? But because of the Viper set up here over towards A, you can see that the orb is up now. It still is creating pressure over towards A, which is perhaps why Sentinels don't want to rotate. But you do see that as G2 come in for this exec and they start, the grav net is ever so slightly too short, right? So it doesn't catch anyone just there as it's being thrown out. And now we just don't have, you know, even though we've thrown out this wall, you know, this wall is just not in a particularly great place. And maybe you could argue that actually in an ideal world, you know, this wall, instead of getting thrown here, maybe gets thrown out towards long instead. And, you know, you focus on this and it gives time for this guy to rotate across and you just focus on Hooker whilst they're destroying the wall. Maybe that's the better play. But, you know, we end up in this situation where, again, this wall, you know, doesn't stop them well enough. And then the pinch comes in and John doesn't know where to go and they die. And again, it's one of those situations where I'm looking at that round and I'm thinking, hey, with a Viper, you know, maybe there's enough delay there if you have a Viper there instead, as opposed to this Deadlock, where if you don't quite get that util timing right with a Deadlock, you can get punished for it like that. And then if we come to the very last round in the game as well, we're going to see, again, G2 are just going to kind of abuse this B site setup that, again, we've got the 3 players over towards A, these 2 over towards B again. And you see we actually push all the way out Shower this time for Sentinels. But again, G2, they're going to abuse this B site and this setup because initially we start with this, right? We've got John looking towards Hooker. You got Zelsis tucked in the close corner here, again, with this sensor up to help him with that fight, right? Makes sense. But what's going to happen in just a second, and this looks like Sentinels, the protocol maybe isn't there for this kind of setup and for this kind of round, because you're going to see what G2 do is they kind of wait out this smoke and then they put their own smoke down here on long, right? So they kind of isolate Zelsis just here, and so now he's in big trouble. So watch what John does here, right? Because this, to me, it kind of shows maybe a lack of, you know, understanding of what we need to do in this situation. Because initially John just comes up to the smoke and you think like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, you know, if they swing this smoke, you know, Zelsis is going to be in a fight. I'm going to be there to trade him. We got the sonic sensor here, like, makes sense, right? But the problem is, as you're going to see, just watch John now, because Zelsis is going to die. He then realizes, oh, but they could just walk out Hooker. So I guess I just have to, you know, come back here. And I suppose probably, I mean, this is the last round and they don't have a ton of money. So I'm going to guess that, you know, what normally happens here is that John has, you know, a sonic sensor here again that will tell them if they, you know, completely jump out Hooker. Maybe that would have happened instead. But you're going to see that what ends up happening is Zelsis dies to Jonah there. And now John is just in a terrible situation again, right? So here in this situation, again, it just shows maybe a bit of a lack of protocol. Maybe, you know, what should happen here when this smoke comes in is John thinks, hey, I'm going to just throw my barrier here, right? I'll just throw my barrier into Hooker. That means that, you know, they can't come here whilst I can come and help support Zelsis. That would make sense. But either, you know, he's just not used to doing that, you know, or it's just not there in terms of the protocols. And so this kind of cost them this round. Okay, now let's come on to Lotus and talk about the Lotus comp, because obviously in the bind comp, the Deadlock is kind of obviously replacing Viper. But here in the Lotus comp, I mean, this could be a Viper again, but it also, you know, could be a Breach. It could be another Initiator, really, if you wanted to instead. And I think we'll see in this round. This round is a good example of one of the struggles that they had on their attack side here, playing this Deadlock, right? Instead of a Viper or a Breach or, you know, another Initiator, whatever. Because they come out and they take C early on here, do Sentinels, and that's fine. And out come G2 and they reclaim A, right? And this is the pattern that this game had a lot, to be honest. That Sentinels would start towards C, G2 would go and take out towards kind of A and out towards Rubble. And what you're going to see here, though, is kind of, I think, the main problem that Sentinels had, which is really that they just, once they'd lost this space on A, they just didn't have enough to kind of reclaim it, right? There just wasn't really enough there because obviously you don't have the Viper wall to kind of keep putting up and, you know, keep creating pressure and kind of, you know, get yourself out of this first part. That's not really there for you. You only have like the cage that lasts a little bit of time, but you can't continuously pressure like a Viper can. But then you also don't have a breach or another initiator who maybe, you know, can give you a bit more oomph in terms of, you know, actually reclaiming this space. So just watch this round here from Sentinels, and they're playing against a Killjoy ult that you can see just here from Leaf. But, you know, they take towards C, then they come over towards B, and it's like, okay, are we going towards B? No. You know, G2 are also there ready for it if they need to. And like you see that they're almost like, oh, we'll go and retake A, I guess, but we do the bare minimum essentially. You know, we just use a prowler out here towards A. You know, we just throw a fade haunt, but we're never really threatening that we're actually going to take A, right? That's never actually pushing these guys off A. You know, so again, it kind of becomes, you know, these guys stick around here. They see that there's not much else there, and they instantly kind of, you know, start rotating back towards B. Right, because that's where the threat actually is. This isn't really an A retake, and this is the problem. They were never actually able to threaten this enough to where then they go for their C hit, but now, you know, the time is running down. We've only got 33 seconds. They're going to go for the C hit, but they're just going to run into this lockdown, and it's not going to be very good.
There's the lockdown.
They're so ready for this, man. Already with the setup as well. Now the storm's not clear from Prior. How do you deal with this? It's 24 seconds on the clock.
They don't have time to get back into this. They just don't.
Containment. He has to drop it. I mean, he was going to be holding on to it. A hostage at a time now, and you can get the reinforcements in. G2 flooding back in with the body. Out through the back as well. And it's perfection in motion. Showstopper. Very pretty finish to the round because it's all done and over. G2. We're going to be up to that 6.
And it wasn't just the fact that they couldn't retake A if they lost it. I also just feel like there is a level of discomfort when I watch them play this comp, because one thing that I associate with Sentinels when they're playing at their best is that they maximize their utility. They're really good at kind of holding on to their utility and finding the perfect moment to use it, you know, when they need it most and getting value from it. But just take a look at this round 12 here, because they're going to start off with what looks like an A fight, right? But I'm going to show you why in a second. This doesn't really make any sense. So they go for the Deadlock Gravnet, right? Okay, it does hit someone there. They go for like the Fade Haunt and all that, right? But our Raze is on the other side of the map. Now in this round, to be fair, Zekken only has a judge, but I don't... There was no... They were never getting out here. You know, as long as G2, which they did in most rounds, G2, you know, we're going to fight A somewhat. Sentinels were never getting out. And again, G2 know that they should fight A because they know that they can't retake it, right? So once G2 have control of this, like, it's over, right? Like, it's just over. Like, that's it. We've got it now. We can then rotate. And so then they come back to a fast C hit, but then, you know, they've got an Omen ult in its last round, so we're not really playing around the ults that our opponent has either. So this is just kind of the thing where it felt like the calling maybe didn't fully make sense. You're going to see, you know, we just rush into this kind of C hit, hoping we can get there in time, even though this, you know, doesn't look great for them either. Like, you're not getting through this either. Right, like we've got the Snakebite, we've got the Orb up, you know, we're now going to Killjoy ult, like you were never getting in here, you know, and whilst that's going on, you know, we use our Armor Flash, we use another Prowler, you know, we've used our Deadlock Wall, but we don't actually get enough to the site, and this is what I mean, right, we've used a lot of util here that's found no value, essentially, and this is like not what you associate with Sentinels, and then, you know, we don't even get the Killjoy lockdown out, they sprint in towards B instead, and so we still have to deal with a Killjoy lockdown that we're not going to, and we're going to get Fade ulted, and we just end up kind of shepherded around the map into a, yeah, sure, we get into a postman, and again, this is where the Deadlock can find some value, of course, but, you know, we've ended there in a very weird state, and at this point, you know, G2 are heavily favored to win this round.
Space garnered though. Lurk's being caught. Jonah P deals with Celsius, locked down. Any sort of plans to deal with this? All being overlaid. Overlap now. These were the Nightfall. Sentinels pressed away. Knives are out. Tens is catching them. And as well, hearing it, Icy Sky might be the difference maker. Annihilation, not sure if that's a miss or what, but Leaf now onto the view, sticking, and it needs to be presence from Sentinels. They can't just give this one up. Bodies matching him. Leaf has to get off of it. Leaf demolishes it.
And then one final thing that I want to point out on the defense side as well is that I didn't love some of the setups that Sentinels went for, right? Because they went for a lot of this, right? Where we have bombarded the C site, as you can see, with a lot of our Sentinel util, right? And you might think that that makes sense. This is going to be hard to get in. Now, in truth, when G2 did go towards C in this game, they didn't struggle that much. There were a couple rounds where this kind of site hold was good enough, but there was other rounds where G2 were able to kind of get through there. But my problem with this setup overall is that it just leaves us with a lack of info. Right, we just again have a lack of info here because of this Cypher setup that we're doing instead. And in fact, G2 this round are just going to go towards A, right? But I think there are better ways of doing this kind of setup, which they did a lot. And you'll just see that, like, you know, we're very static here in terms of our lack of movement and stuff like that, because when you see a lot of ciphers on this map, and they did do it sometimes, but not enough for my liking, you know, you see your cipher camera out here getting early info towards C, checking it every so often. If there's no one there, of course, we know then we can start rotating. If there's a lot of people there, then we can, you know, come back. And to me, when I'm looking at this kind of setup and I'm looking at, like, okay, we've got Deadlock Cypher on this map, one thing that I never saw them do, and I was really kind of surprised why, is why not start with your cipher camera out here, have your cipher actually rotate, and have your Deadlock here, you know, kind of being the person out towards C, because then you can flick on this cipher camera every so often, and if there is like 4 people here, right, and they're about to do a C exec, you know you can then throw the wall, and that's going to slow them down enough to get rotates in. Right, we never saw anything kind of like that, and it did kind of surprise me, because we ended up in a lot of situations like this where, you know, the map kind of eventually becomes free to G2, right? If they win this A fight over here, you know, at this point they can go anywhere, right? If they go C, they're hitting, you know, only one guy on the site. If they come in towards B, and you see that, in fact, John does put out this Deadlock wall at this point in the round, and he does that, you know, because he's worried, because if they do a B split, you know, they're free to do a B split, and it would probably work. Or they can come towards A, and it would probably have a decent chance as well, right? So at this point in the round, like, G2 are kind of free to do anything. They just go for a big pause, which is very clever. And again, because we don't have any deep counter cam here, instead, you know, we're kind of locked into this, and you see how passive they are. And anytime the map looks like this on Lotus, the defensive side is probably not going to win. And G2, you know, I don't know, they didn't hear this wall, I don't think, but if they did, you know, they waited long enough for it to become useless, essentially, and just waited it out for where it's going to go down before they actually do a site exec. And now you see, again, like at this point in the round, they can go anywhere, and it's probably got a decent chance of working.
Sassy trying to put that pressure and apply it. He's with the heat now. Nightfall has to be respected. Icy, he's fast on the trail as well, sniffing them all out for the back of the site, revealed and spammed away. There's no hope in hell. And Sassy just could not work his way through that one. A nade rebounding forces the satchel away. Once more, 3 players to stand for Sentinels, and a decision is made for them. They cannot play into this.